Disclaimer, I like CinemaSins, but I felt a need to respond to a lot of things they said in this video in particular. Also, I'm aware this is an oddly timed video since it involves a Christmas movie, but I've got no other ideas for videos right now, and there's no way I'm waiting till next Christmas to upload this.
The 1992 Disney logo knew to get in and out within 14 seconds, and that's a sin for this movie for all the later movies that didn't continue this trend, but instead inflated the logo to deep-throat viewers before every movie. And also because it's followed here by a 19-second Jim Henson Productions logo, giving us a total of 33 seconds of logos.
I'm confused. You're sinning this movie for things later movies did, which is already strange, but then you also say it's because of the standard X seconds of logos sin. Why not just say 33 seconds of logos and avoid confusion? Also, you say you like the 14-second Disney logo, but then sin the 19-second Jim Henson logo. I guess those extra 5 seconds were just too much for you.
Let's have a lunch.
Get it? Because they're pigs!
Well, that, and it's setting up a line one of them has later in the movie about how he might go to Scrooge's funeral if lunch is provided, which is also a line from the book, therefore showing the brilliant way this movie weaves together dialogue from the book and the Muppet style of comedy. But yeah, sure, it's because they're pigs.
I see here's more cabbage, but this cabbage isn't sentient. Why? Why aren't these little onion egg daubers here sentient?
In the same way that some characters in the Muppet world are just regular humans. Some food is just regular food.
Well, would you look at these two little assholes right here?
What's the sin here?
Movie's adding more Marleys than the original. Okay, but they seriously both died at the same time?
Gonzo never said... What? Excuse me. Charles Dickens never said they died at the same time.
Paints you with indifference the way women paint with rouge, and the only reason is because it's not easy to rhyme Scrooge, and they needed to rhyme with Scrooge here. And it's a kids' movie, so they couldn't use spooge.
Okay, I'm convinced this sin was originally something like, oh, come on, you could have come up with a better rhyme for Scrooge than that. Then after doing a bit of research, they found there actually aren't that many rhymes for Scrooge. But rather than just doing the logical thing and scrapping this sin, they turned it into a joke about semen when they noticed that one of the rhymes was a slang term for it.
That's a porcupine on the right, I think, but what the is this other thing?
Well, if you're going to be asking things like that about a Muppet movie, we'll be here all day. I mean, what the fuck is Gonzo? Yeah, I know! But if I said what the fuck is Charles Dickens, people would be even more confused.
Even the vegetables don't like him.
Yeah, I hear the eggplant emoji.
Skip.
Please, sir, I want some cheese.
Look around, kid. You are in a movie full of it.
Wait, you sinned that, but not the mouse rhyming houses with mouses?
Oh, Jesus for us, Mises.
Goddamn, the mice need some grammar lessons almost as badly as they need cheese. It's already plural.
Jeremy, the reason why they are saying it like that is so it rhymes, which I guess you could still consider a sin, but at least get the reason for the sin right.
Don't mice eat all kinds of and cheese is like a delicacy we leave out in the traps to tempt them?
Did anyone say otherwise?
As solitary as an oyster.
Mr. Dickens has never eaten oysters with meat, where there are many on the plate and many in the toilet an hour later, but none are solitary. I guess he means before they are harvested, but they're out there in the water with a bunch of other oysters and shells. They don't come out, but maybe they don't want to. This is like calling residents of a retirement home antisocial.
There's a lot wrong with this one. Firstly, Jeremy for some reason thinks Mr. Dickens is talking about the way oysters behave when they are dead and people are eating them. But then he works out that that's not what he meant, and he's actually referring to the way they stay in their shell. So he's basically done my job for me here. Then he follows that up by randomly asking, what if they don't want to come out? As if Dickens was criticising oysters for staying in their shells. All he's saying is that Scrooge keeps to himself like an oyster staying in its shell. What's wrong with that in Scrooge's case is what this movie is about. But just because it's wrong for Scrooge to be like that doesn't mean it's also true for oysters.
They're singing about how terrible he is, and he's just about to turn around suddenly and scare them all into scattering. So, can he hear this song they're singing about how awful he is? Does he hear no song, but still sense the presence of a crowd following him?
I'm pretty sure the song is just for us. A crowd of people is always going to make noise even when they aren't singing. Hence why he turns around. When a person you don't like is nearby, people often talk about how awful they are. So if the person you are talking about then turns to look at you, you are naturally going to scatter and pretend you were doing something else. As for why they were following him in the first place, okay, I'll give you that one. That is a bit weird.
You know, Scrooge is pretty much the only motherfucker in this movie with a British accent.
Not true. The actors playing Fred, Clara, and the Ghost of Christmas Past are all British. The actress playing Belle is from New Zealand, but sounds English in this movie. So basically the humans are all English because that's where the story is set, and the Muppets are all American because we know the Muppets are an American property.
How would the bookkeepers like to be suddenly
Unemployed!
This is my island in the sun.
Hilarious moment, but where did the costumes come from? How can I be afraid of Scrooge or the ghosts or anything in this movie if you're saying so little what I'm seeing is real that nothing matters?
Okay, first off, since when are you supposed to be afraid of Scrooge or the ghost? Second, just because the Muppets are using the cartoon logic of quickly changing clothes, that doesn't mean this isn't real. The Muppet world operates under similar logic to the world of Roger Rabbit. Cartoon logic applies to the Muppets, and real-world logic applies to the humans.
Of you to be merry. You're poor enough.
Fucking asshole. Rich and hoards money? Fine. But going out of his way to mock his own flesh and blood for being poor? Fucking asshole.
Firstly, in regards to thinking Scrooge is an asshole at this point in the story, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to feel that way. Second, if you listen to the dialogue, you'd know Scrooge is responding to Fred saying Merry Christmas to him.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle Scrooge. God save you.
Merry Christmas. Bah. Humbug.
This doesn't make sense to him because he's poor, hence his question.
Merry Christmas, you say. What right of you to be merry?
I'd like to speak to you about a donation.
Bunsen and Binker come here asking Scrooge for a charitable donation because they are literally the only two people left in London that don't know Scrooge is a penny-pinching, poor people-hating dickwipe.
It's made more clear in the book that these charity collectors don't know Scrooge or his business, so obviously they wouldn't know he's tight-fisted with money either.
You know, Scrooge has a point. If he doesn't celebrate Christmas, what's everyone's problem with forcing it on him?
But that's not really what these people are doing. Fred just tells him what he thinks of Christmas, suggests he not be so grumpy since he's rich, and invites him to come to his house the next day. The charity collectors are just asking for a donation. The only thing said that relates to Christmas is maybe Fred questioning Scrooge, calling it a humbug.
Christmas a humbug, Uncle? Oh, you don't mean that, surely.
The heart of it. Scrooge is heartbroken. It's actually a huge part of what helps viewers, readers feel empathy for him. But even this movie's theatrical cut removed the song about his lost love, and it breaks my sinning heart to have to sit in this movie twice for it.
So you're sending the movie for something you like about it?
All around about, deep at Christmas.
Once again, the entire goddamn city has been bitching about how awful this guy is, but this caroler decides to go rogue and try to charm his ass.
Just because the city was singing about him doesn't mean literally everyone knows what he's like. Also, maybe he didn't know that was Scrooge's office. I mean, he does stop singing when he sees him.
How long has Bob been working for Scrooge? Given his disdain for Christmas, he's probably open that day every year, so this shouldn't be a surprise for his employees.
Maybe that's why they're not surprised then.
Cratchit and the bookkeepers immediately began that most pleasant of activities.
The interspecies Christmas.
Skip.
Great job! One window down. One.
What's the sin here?
It's the Penguins' Christmas skating party.
Which will totally anyone else that walks down this alleyway.
So the sin is there's antisocial behaviour going on in the middle of London. Sounds pretty accurate to me.
Everything speaks English in this universe, even the vegetables, but the penguins can only communicate via this weird quacking.
That's basically it, Jeremy, yes.
You know what Scrooge is doing. We're down here and he's up there.
Yes, a rat would be excellent at cinema sins. At least it's not the endgame rat.
That's not a sin of this movie, though. I guess the sin here is just that Rizzo would be excellent at cinema sins, but since Dickens actually addresses his point right away, I'm still saying this isn't a sin.
But these days, many people would use these assholes as stand-ins for Chris and me, and that's just not true. We're much better looking.
Christ, how many of these sins are just jokes? Skip. And that goes for all the joke sins from now on.
Why does this asshole get a second chance at life? Like, it's clear from this song that the Marleys didn't even like Scrooge, but why did they get an opportunity to warn him about his misdeeds? If anything, they should be pissed off that no one did this for them.
How do we know someone didn't do it for them when they just ignored it? As for why they are warning him, it's probably a job they've been given which, if successful in changing Scrooge, will make the punishment they face in the afterlife less severe.
Literally just established that Gonzo is an omniscient narrator, so why is Rizzo so horned up to see the action himself? He'll know what's happening every step of the way.
Oh, okay, Jeremy, then I guess to you, watching a movie and listening to that movie's audio description while wearing a blindfold are the same thing.
Wait, you're telling me this was just visited by two ghosts and freaked the out, but is able to drop off to sleep just an hour or so afterward?
At this point, Scrooge isn't certain that what he saw was real, so he probably feels like going to sleep is the best way to shake off these strange visions he's having.
Okay, but if the cat can see these two, then why can't everyone and everything else?
This is a fair point, but I think it's best explained by assuming the Muppet characters don't work around real-world logic, or in this case, the logic set down by the source material. So the shadows of the past can't see Scrooge, but they probably can see the Muppet characters. That's how the Muppet world works. This would also explain why some Muppet characters break the fourth wall and even acknowledge the fact they are in a movie sometimes. It's also possible the characters in the story are aware Mr. Dickens and Rizzo are the narrators of the story, and so, while they can see them, they also know to ignore them. A non-sentient cat, however, wouldn't know that.
The lamplighters are at work. It's Christmas Eve for certain.
Narrating the work of civil servants on Christmas Eve really only hammers home the fact that their asses are working on Christmas Eve, no?
Or it's a compliment on the commitment to their job that they are willing to do this every night of the year.
Then I should point out that Gonzo and Rizzo shouldn't have been able to climb the ladder, interact with the fire.
Again, Muppet logic.
Do you know how much the firm is spending for this party?
Why'd Scrooge wait until now to bring this up?
Because if you listen to the dialogue, you'd know he's only just found that out.
Excuse me, Mr. Fozziwig.
Excuse me.
Sir, I've been going over the accounts. Do you know how much the firm is spending for this party?
Man, most of the time I hate musicals, but this musical has pretty awesome music, and it's been forever since it music. That with the electric mayhem at the party doesn't count. I want a goddamn song.
Oh, I see. You're making I don't know, can we call this a joke? But anyway, you're saying the fact they cut the song When Love Is Gone from this scene. Which makes even less sense when you consider how short this scene is without it, with a jarring change in tone, the fact that the final song in the movie is an inverted version of it, and that it is such an important part in Scrooge's arc. So yeah, totally agree with this sin. Though it is a testament to how fucking good this movie is that the worst thing about it is something not being in it.
Until the nearby clock began to strike the hour.
The church bells ring on the hour all throughout the night? How the does anyone sleep in London?
Okay, firstly, given that the church bells chiming at night is something that really happens, I don't see how this is a sin of the movie. As for how people sleep, probably the same way anyone that lives near something that makes noise. They just get used to it.
I welcome you to Christmas morning!
If the ghost of Christmas present actually takes him to Christmas morning a little bit in the future.
Wait a second. A little bit in the future? We have a word for the next day, Jeremy. We call it tomorrow. But anyway, finish what you were saying.
Future. Shouldn't his name be Ghost of Christmas a little bit from now?
In this context, Christmas present refers to the Christmas of the year they are presently in. I'm going to remove a cinema sin here for pointing out this moment where the choir boy gets hit in the face. I've seen this movie countless times and I've never noticed that before.
I do have a good one, Clara.
I believe Dickens confirmed this was written into Fred's proposal to Clara.
Seems unlikely since he didn't even give his wife a name in the book.
I'd feel sad for Scrooge finding out his nephew hates him, but then I remember Scrooge is a massive dickwad who deserves to be hated and also deserves to feel sad for once. The dickwad.
So, what's the sin here exactly? By the way, this scene where Fred makes fun of his uncle has always irked me a little. Why does Fred take pleasure in making fun of his uncle? I know Scrooge is a dick, but he's not really done anything wrong. If he doesn't want to spend Christmas with his nephew, that's his choice. It's not like his absence is stopping you from enjoying Christmas. If anything, it makes it easier. But I guess Fred isn't supposed to be a flawless person. The point is more that Scrooge doesn't like the fact he's being made fun of, and that so many people take pleasure in their shared dislike for him.
Dude, I obviously love this movie, but it takes way too long to miss Piggy, and barely Kermit's at all.
Well, that is the nature of this story. Unless you're going to have Kermit play Scrooge, he's not going to get much screen time. They did give him a song, though. By the way, I just want to make it clear that I'm not suggesting Kermit should have played Scrooge. There's no way he'd have worked as the unpleasant Scrooge at the start of the story.
He told me that he hoped the people saw him in church.
Attention whore.
If you'd fucking let Bob finish what he was saying, you'd have heard him say...
He told me that he hoped the people saw him in church because it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Which, by the way, is a line taken right out of the book. So you're basically sinning the book here.
So Piggy birthed out 2 pigs and 2 frogs as a result of the mating? Why isn't there a hybrid among the mix? Do pig and frog DNA splice this selectively?
Again, the Muppets follow cartoon logic where cross-species mating exists, and typically with that, boys are the same species as their father and girls are the same species as their mother. Heck, if you're going to apply real-life science to this movie featuring ghosts and talking animals, why not send the fact a frog and a pig were able to procreate together? Since, that's impossible.
For a family made out of felt, they sure did fireplace and candle the out of this Christmas feast.
Maybe that's because it's nighttime, and the invention of the light bulb is almost 40 years away.
I believe it will end upon the stroke of 12.
But the first spirit appeared at 1, and this dude showed up at 2. Why the hell are we jumping all the way back to midnight?
Assuming this is supposed to be consistent with the book, this is 12 on the next night. In fact, in the book, Marley makes it quite clear that all 3 spirits will show up on separate nights. Also, because he's the ghost of Christmas present, his time ends when Christmas Day ends. Now, of course, when Scrooge wakes up in the morning, it's Christmas Day, meaning it's only been 1 night, because the spirits, in Scrooge's own words, can do anything they like. So, I don't know, consider that a plot hole if you want.
Man, it would be fantastic if in just one of these adaptations this guy shrugged in response and ambled off while smoking a cigarette.
Okay, obviously this is a joke, but I genuinely don't get this one. Is it a reference to something I'm not familiar with? Seriously, if anyone can explain this sin to me, please do. I'm going to add my own sin here for removing the narrators for this part. I mean, I guess they thought that since they were also the comic relief, they would seem out of place during the most depressing part of the story. But when you're already having to deal with a ghost that doesn't talk, surely this is the perfect time to have a narrator.
Scrooge watches some dudes laugh about a now-dead guy they all hated, and after all he's been through, he still turns to the spirit and asks who the men were talking about, because Scrooge is a blockhead, I guess. Good with numbers, bad with basic narrative structure.
Scrooge is in denial at this point. He doesn't want to believe they are talking about him. Having observed so many people speak ill of him, he realises how unhappy it makes him and how much he doesn't want people to think of him like this. So when he hears people talking about how they are glad an unnamed person is dead, he clings to the hope that, since they don't mention his name, it might not be him. I mean, honestly, Jeremy, put yourself in this situation. You see a vision of the future where people you know are talking about being glad someone is dead? Would you want to believe they were talking about you?
Still warm.
This spider is a sick man. Like, even if he's looking to profit off Scrooge's shit after he's dead, why would it matter if these blankets are warm?
It doesn't matter. He's just commenting on it.
I would not want to show weak eyes to your father when he gets home.
Yikes! Listen, husbands and wives and partners need to be able to have emotions in front of one another.
Yikes, sitting a mother who's mourning the loss of her youngest child. By the way, can I just mention how fucking brilliant this scene is? As sad scenes in movies go, this for me is right up there with the stampede scene in The Lion King or that horse drowning in Neverending Story. The real thing that helps hit it home is the idea that it's not just Tiny Tim that's died, but Robin the Frog as well.
Wipes his own name off the tombstone and then sobs like he wasn't expecting it because he's an idiot!
Firstly, I don't know what it is about Scrooge sobbing that suggests he wasn't expecting it. I still cried the day my mother passed away, even though I'd known it was going to happen for 3 months. But again, Scrooge is in denial. He knows deep down that it's going to be his name on the gravestone. Why do you think he's so reluctant to go to it and uncover the name? Heck, he even says, before uncovering the name,
A life can be made right.
in other words, even if all these people are happy about my passing in this vision of the future, I still have the chance to change it. So he's basically saying right there he knows they were talking about him. Jesus, how do you miss these things?
Buy it for me and I'll give you a shilling.
I love this. The rich entitled asshole has finally learned the meaning of Christmas and selflessness, and his first act is to pay someone else to do an errand for him.
He's paying him to buy the turkey to ensure he gets it before someone else buys it, since this kid is already out on the street while Scrooge isn't even dressed. It's also showing that he wants to help as many people as he can. He's buying a turkey for someone else and helping a kid that probably doesn't have much money to earn a bit of cash at the same time. Also, I think you're overlooking the way Scrooge asks the lad, and also seem to be assuming that because this is the first thing he does, that this is all he's going to do.
We made a massive deal about Bob being off work for Christmas Day, but what about these sad that have to man the poultry shop, especially first thing in the morning?
What about them? They're not employed by Scrooge, so you can't fault him for that. Heck, maybe it's their business and they've chosen to be open on Christmas Day.
Not only did Scrooge have these 5 shillings prepped in an easily throwable coin purse,
That's not the 5 shillings, Jeremy. That's the money for the turkey. By the way, there's an odd change from the book here. In the book, Scrooge only promises the boy half a crown, and that's if he comes back within 5 minutes. I guess the writers of this movie just felt that wasn't generous enough.
now he's throwing money at a charity. So basically Scrooge has learned to do nice things, but to use his money to do them.
These 2 men specifically came to Scrooge the day before asking him if he was willing to give them money. What exactly did you expect him to do? Also, the central element of Scrooge's wickedness was how greedy he was with money and how unwilling he was to give any of it away. So the fact he's willing to give money to charity is a mark of how much he's changed, as well as recognizing how greedy he's been and attempting to make up for it.
Scrooge literally points 3 times vaguely and then dumps a bag of gold coins into the shopkeeper's hand. Somehow, he gets what he wanted and paid the right price.
To be honest, it's not really clear what Scrooge is doing here. He might be buying something, but he might also just be giving the shopkeeper something for his troubles. And even if he is buying something, there's nothing in this scene to suggest he's paid the exact right amount. In fact, he almost certainly gave him a lot more than that and just said, keep the change. Also, this is an example of a personal pet peeve of mine.
Scrooge literally points 3 times.
Your use of the word literally here is technically correct, but it's also completely pointless. What's wrong with just saying Scrooge points 3 times? Was it to make it clear you weren't exaggerating? Because I don't see anyone thinking the statement points 3 times is an exaggeration.
More coal for the fire! Literally a job benefit they should already have been receiving. He shouldn't get kudos for this.
He's making up for past mistakes. That's what he's getting kudos for, as you put it. The purpose of this sequence is to show the way he's changed. If an average person gave you coal, you probably wouldn't think much of it. But if a person who only yesterday would rather see his entire staff freeze to death than put even one more bit of coal on the fire is now giving every employee a bucket of coal, you'd probably think he was being very generous. Also, you seem to be assuming that this is all he's doing, and it's all he's ever going to do. This is just the start of him fixing things, and then making things better. If you're in someone's debt, you've got to break even before you can start becoming friends. I'm going to add my own sin here for reducing Scrooge's interaction with Fred on Christmas Day to just a couple of gifts and a hug. In the book, he spends the whole afternoon with Fred's whole family. I mean, why have the scene where Fred is inviting Scrooge to spend Christmas Day with his family if you're not going to have the changed Scrooge actually do that? Instead, he goes to spend Christmas with an employee's family in a much smaller house. And yes, I know Fred is at the Cratchits' house at the end, but it still seems like an odd change to me, especially since the act of bringing the Cratchits a massive turkey for Christmas can't really be seen as a kind gesture if you are also going to invite a bunch more people over to the house to eat it.
He just handed out gifts to half the city while singing a happy song, but Scrooge takes extra time to with Bob specifically before he unzips his Christmas spirit.
Well, yeah. I don't see what the sin is here. You just described something that happened in the movie.
But also, this is the greatest Muppets movie ever made, it's the greatest Christmas Carol movie ever made, and it's arguably the greatest Christmas movie ever made.
Can't argue with any of those three claims, really. I mean, personally, in regards to the third one, I might be tempted to say Love Actually is better, but this movie has so much more to do with Christmas and is a far better story, so no, this is still better. Now I'd like to talk about my feelings about this movie as a whole. Of all the adaptations of this book there have been over the years, who would have thought the Muppets would have been the best one? Wouldn't you think that the clash of the modern cartoonish-looking American puppets with 19th century London would just be too jarring? But by starting the story with a Muppet character who was also their portrayal of Charles Dickens, it was easy for us to see the story through the eyes of both the author and the Muppets. They also weren't scared to take a few risks with how they treated the source material. They added songs, many of which just tell us things the story tells us anyway, but they knew they had to add them in because it's a Muppet movie. They made Marley two people so they could be portrayed by Stalter and Waldorf. By the way, the other Marley is called Robert, which Bob is short for. Get it? I mean, that's just genius. Whoever thought of that in the writer's room, I hope they got a pay rise. Fizzywig is portrayed by Fozzie Bear and called Fozzywig. Okay, haha, very funny. But he also fits the character very well, so I don't think it was just so they could do that pun. Robin the Frog as Tiny Tim adds so much more impact to his death. Mrs. Cratchit actually has a scene with Scrooge in this version, showing that her claim that she wanted to give him a piece of her mind wasn't just words, she really was ready to knock him out. They make fun of the book's original text in a couple of places. Probably this was because there are so many versions already, they just figured, well, if fans of the book don't like what we did here, they can just go watch another version. Probably the worst things I can say about this movie are the things not in it. I've already talked about the removing of the narrator from the Christmas Yet to Come section and the downplaying of Fred, but I was also disappointed by the complete omission of Scrooge's sister Fan. Now, I understand that it's an adaptation with a lot of original stuff in it, so even though it's a short book, they still can't include everything. But Scrooge's relationship with her is such a key point in starting his transformation into a kinder man, as she was the one person in his life that truly loved him. He starts to realise that by rejecting Fred, he's almost by extension rejecting the memory of his sister that loved him so much. This might not have been such a problem if they hadn't cut the When Love Is Gone song, which meant Scrooge doesn't really start any kind of regret for the way he's treated people until he's in the Cratchits' house. Also, one thing that's always bothered me about the original book, how exactly did Scrooge's actions in helping the Cratchits keep Tiny Tim from dying? Dickens, I'm sure quite deliberately, never mentions what illness Tiny Tim has. So I guess we're supposed to assume that whatever he had was treatable at the time the book was written, it's just the Cratchits couldn't afford it. What with the forming of the National Health Service being more than 100 years away. But what illness fits the criteria of being treatable in the mid-19th century, but also being fatal without treatment? Also, did Scrooge and Tiny Tim die at the same time? Or is it possible the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come was showing Scrooge visions from two separate Christmases? But enough negativity. Real strength for this movie compared to other versions of the story is Scrooge's arc. There's a clear gradual change to him during the visits of the three spirits. Seeing Belle leave him makes him feel sad, but he blames the spirit for showing it to him. Seeing people on Christmas morning and the Cratchits help him to see what he's chosen to shut himself away from. And in seeing people happy he's dead, he realises he doesn't want people to hate him in this way. He goes from blaming others for his mistakes, to thinking he could change for his own benefit, to realising he actually needs to change for others, and also really wants to change for the sake of his own happiness. It's an emotional change that I just don't think I've seen in any other version, and for me, the main reason I consider this the greatest Christmas movie ever.